My name is Alexar. I didn't think of how to introduce myself, so if that's okay, I'll introduce myself later. When I was coming here, I was on the phone with my friend, and I told him I'm very curious to see how many people show up in the talk because of the title, and also what kind of people in terms of what they do in the industry, whether they're techie, non-techie, the business side, and whatever passion that they have. And it's really good for me to see a very good crowd here. So before I actually start officially, I want to mention this is my first time talking about the future officially in a conference. It's very important for all of us to recognize the time that we are at right now. We are right at the verge of a lot of changes, and it's important to recognize the importance of thinking and things that in the past might have been looking like philosophy or maybe just some ideas and dreams for the far distant future are very important for us to think about those things more practically. In the talk, I will get to that part as well, and I'll explain more what I mean by that. But the main reason that I'm giving this talk, even though it's something that I have never done in this format before, is it's mainly about the practical part, and I want this to be perceived that way. So, firstly, I want to set the scope. When we talk about the future, it can go anywhere. Like you can think about a very long, far in the future in terms of time and also in terms of scope. So I wanted to start with saying I'm not going to talk about the future of universe, even though I'm interested in talking to you about it later. But it's not that limited either. So we are going to talk about the future of, if not future of humanity, but future of humans. And I'm going to show you how it's related and how important it is. So there's a thing called future studies, right? So when we want to, for example, when we want to study the future of humans, we look at humans to start with, and we start with humans. Humans are a species, right? So we try to understand them as a species. So there are, as a species that we know, biological species, the two distinct categories of a species, regardless of whether they're insects, mammals, or others. Snakes, spiders, cats, these are all in the same group of species, which I wanted actually to ask you. Does anyone have an idea of which two groups I'm talking about? No? Neither? Okay. Yeah? Yes, any species. Yeah. So when you want to study a species, you normally, if you want to study a snake, so the way it shapes, take a snake and you study it, and that would be enough. But if you want to study, for a cat, it would also be enough. But if you want to study dogs, just if you take one dog and study it, it would not be enough, because a dog is defined the way it behaves in a group. Wolves as well, a pack of wolves. Ants in particular. So if you want to study ants, you would study a colony of ants. It's way more important than an individual ant. So this is the second group type of species, social creatures or social animals or social species that have a totally different aspects, two different distinct aspects, as an individual and as a group. When it comes to humans, study of these two distinct categories fall into these different sciences, psychology and sociology. And as a member of that group, as an individual, so the other difference about humans is that we actually, these different categories are self-conscious. So an individual human actually takes conscious effort to grow, as well as a group of humans. whether it's a little community or it's a nation or, let's say, a Drupal community, is self-conscious and takes effort to grow economically or in other ways, which is important to recognize. Also, from outside, these efforts of these two groups manifest itself in more abstract concepts. For individuals, it would be identity, and an example of those concepts that would manifest itself as. And as a group, it would be a civilization. What's very interesting, even though the dynamic of these two groups are entirely separate, as you can imagine, you as an individual, you have your own things going on, your own goals, your own desires, everything. And as a civilization, there's the whole entire different dynamic. These two have one thing in common, which we get to that, which is also fundamentally the same as well. Can anyone guess what that is before I move on? Yeah?
It looks like values.
Values? Good. Yes, that's a good guess. There are many things like that, but even values, when you think of a value individually yourself, or as a group. When you think about it, that value, memories that you have about that value, or even if you want to talk about it, you would formulate it as a story. So let's go to the individual first. So this is proven already that the way our brain works, our brain cannot comprehend data. So in a very fundamental level, it connects information and makes up a story. It has to have some sort of narrative, and that's how it stores information, that's how it retrieves information. And because also brain, the whole thing is elastic and emergent, this pattern happens in higher levels as well as higher level emerges. When you think about yourself as an identity is the higher level, who you think you are, what you think you want to do today. These are all stories. So this is more about psychology, and I'm not an expert on it, but this is something that I hope you take it as a fact. As a society also, we run on stories. So society has two aspects. One aspect, the society itself, any group itself, has its own identity. That's where, when you said they have values in common, is when it acts as one entity, but also the interactions between different members of society. When we individually interact with each other, we also interact with each other through stories. Lost two people already. So this is what I mean by that, which I'll get back to that if I needed to. So there are separate categories of stories to show you these examples, and then we get to the technical bits. So gossip is one of the categories that we run. So these are examples of those stories that we use to interact with each other to shape our society and the dynamic of our society. News story, blog post, and review, and I hope you start seeing a pattern here. Promise is a different category of stories we use in our society. Marketing, money, estate, these definitions, they're all stories that we share, and we intersubjectively believe in it, and that's why they work. And the nature of them is a promise, and they're all the same nature, the way they work. Command is another one. Again, some other examples of the stories that we use to kind of make society work, because we need to believe in these stories collectively, otherwise they would not work. Some other examples. So all these examples, I want to make the point that all these things are what we also know as content. So that's where it becomes important. Drupal is a content management system. That has what has brought us together here. When we talk about Drupal, we talk about a content management system that's using technology to manage content. So we are managing content. Even though in projects that we are working on at the moment, we may be managing content in a very basic level, it's important to understand what we're dealing with has roots in the way we are as an individual, and also we interact as a society, and it shapes our society. Because different trends in technology are mating, and interesting or maybe scary things will happen soon. So a few very quick examples about stories of self. Identity, dreams and hopes. I don't want to talk much on this because I may lose time. Fears and regrets. These are all the stories that we have, and it all gets back to technology later in the talk, and if we have time, we actually dive deeper in it. So, before I go further, I want to get a response maybe or reflection of the crowd. If you see, I don't know how to ask actually, how do you see so far the connection between stories, the way it shapes our society and ourselves individually, and content that we interact with, whether in our work or in our own life experience? Do we see the connection here yet? Yes? No, it's not that strong? Okay. If that is the case, I jump ahead, go to the next section, and I would start with an example. I think that would be better. So I thought I give some examples of what I mean by that and how we can apply future thinking. So this is a fictional story, the city food court. In this city, there is one food court in the middle of the city, and that's the only place where you can find food. Lunchtime, you will go there. And let me just think whether I wanted to put this one first. So what happened is that this food court started bringing all different restaurants and food providers in one place, and make sure that they deliver a good quality service, everything is fun, and it's good quality. But that is the only place that you can get food. This is a metaphor for YouTube. Okay, and now I realize I couldn't actually have jumped. I'll go back to explain what I mean by future first. Sorry about that, because there was a reference back to what I wanted to say. So we are going to study the future. It's important for me to explain what I mean by that, for us to be on the same page. So what does thinking about future means? When we think about the future, we normally tend to attempt to predict it, okay? So when Wright brothers flew for the first time, if someone then wanted to predict what happens in the future that the people would tend, they could actually predict that this will happen. It was possible to predict that. Same thing when we invented photography, it would be possible to predict that we would have at one point immersive videos, even though if you didn't know what video is or if it's possible or not, you could actually think, because this way of prediction is based on evolution. You can imagine how something will evolve in the future, but it doesn't always work. So, for example, in terms of, if I take you 200 years ago, or whatever that is, I didn't look it up on Wikipedia, when the photography was invented, and you told me, then, okay, sometime in the future we will have the ability to immerse ourselves in a video that's being recorded. I would say, cool. Also, we have also invented telegraph. And what is telegraph? It allows us to send some signals to another place without sending any physical object or animal or even human being to the other object. Would that make you predict anything in particular? No, because if I told you about telegraph, the furthest thing that you could think about in terms of prediction would be maybe Twitter. Not even that, because it would require other things that it wouldn't come to your mind. But we tried. What I wanted to say, would you think of YouTube? Would you explain a platform that would be called YouTube right now? YouTube itself doesn't matter. YouTube, when we say YouTube, we just use one word, but it's a very, very complex platform. And it's a combination of a lot of different things. And for that to happen, many different trends had to meet, many infrastructure had to exist. Not only technology-wise, but also in terms of access to resources, understanding of technology and everything for a complex concept like YouTube to happen. If you think about trying to explain what YouTube is to someone when photography was invented, you would find it difficult. The point being is that there are certain things that you can't predict this way, and those things are emergent phenomena. So emergence happens when a service or a product becomes commodity or infrastructure, and on top of that, another thing would emerge from it. I'm not going to go deeper in it because I may not have enough vocabulary, but this is one of the main points that I wanted to mention. And sometimes it's just like a click, because the whole thing, the potential is getting there. You may not see it, but the whole thing may seem like an event, whereas for those who were having a close eye, they could have predicted it if they understand emergence. And that's what's important. The way we're dealing with content at the moment is very primitive, based on the technology that we have access to right now. Even if we don't think about emerging trends, right now we can do much, much more with the content. But there are other trends that are meeting each other, and very soon we can do a lot more. And I'm going to the next happen very differently. And the whole point of this talk is not about predicting the future, because it's not possible to predict the future. In scientific communities, it's being more and more discredited when someone tries to predict the future. What we can do, we can project to the future. Is that how you say it? Or in the future? Yeah? Project in the future. No, actually, it's an actual question. Project in the future. Yeah, so because that would allow us to project in different ways, and also we recognize by using different terminology that we are doing it from our standpoint. We're not predicting something objective out there. And the other very important thing is we may see, if we put ourselves in different positions, different projections. And any of these projections may happen, and we can actually have an active role in deciding which way it goes. And where we are at the moment, there are some extreme different ways that information technology can take us. And we can actively, especially as an open source community, can contribute to the one that we want to shape. That's a very important point for me to communicate. The fact that we can actually have a strong effect in shaping it. So now I jump ahead. So again, in this city, so with this example, I'm trying to use this as a metaphor of showing how something that's happening right now doesn't necessarily make sense. We just don't see that it doesn't make sense because we're used to it. So, for example, the way we use YouTube, right now, it's not in our interest, but YouTube has done a great job of creating the market. But the technology has advanced that we don't need an entity like YouTube, and YouTube itself is an entity that's extracting value out of our market and out of our collective growth and intelligence. I will jump ahead in this point. I wish I could get some feedback to see how I'm going. So this is what we see YouTube is doing. Connecting producers to consumers. I'm using these words as supply chain metaphors. But what we don't notice is these two entirely different roles that YouTube is playing at the same time. And it doesn't have to be the case. So YouTube has done a great job by doing these two roles to create the market. It's been great. But the problem is these two roles being centralized in one place. That's danger. And there are different ways that we can argue why it's dangerous, which I don't want to get into it. But how could technology allow us, how a new emergent technology would make things different? In this case, I want to give example of distributed ledger technologies, blockchain, stuff like that. One of the attributes that they have, of one of the functionalities or capabilities that they provide, is the ability to give provenance to a piece of content or information. So we can now anchor a digital thing to its context, which we couldn't do in the past. That's why we needed a third party to play that role of being a guardian. The moment technology allows us to do that role, I think I deleted that slide. What we can see, so at the moment, because YouTube is in the middle, producers are doing all the hard work, the profit directly goes to YouTube and producers are getting part of it. It's not about money and they're getting little money. The problem is that the feedback loop is broken. So it's not as strong. First of all, feedback loop is manipulated in the way, that's the first problem. So someone decides what content is original, what's not, what's good for the society, what's not, that's the first problem. The second problem is that we will never see emergent phenomenon from this, because this is not an open market. This is more like I don't know about political stuff, but communism, I may be wrong, but in a communist country, the regulatory body tries to make sure the market is healthy and is doing the right thing and everyone gets the right thing. This is a similar role. But as we know, when you open it up, again, not going into arguments whether capitalism is good or not, but fundamentally, capitalism, open market, allows for direct feedback loop, for rapid innovation, rapid validation, and you see crazy stuff and emergent stuff happening when you open it up. In the past, we could not do it, not that we didn't want to do it. We couldn't do it, and we needed an entity like that. But right now, when a producer creates a piece of content, they can protect that piece of content digitally, and they can allow anyone who wishes to publish it or host it, or anyone who wishes to distribute it or market it or promote it, get benefit from it. So instead of being stuck with one platform that sometimes, as we know, they force you to be exclusive, like Spotify and stuff like that, cases like that. Right now, imagine you create a piece of content. It may be controversial, it may be conservative, maybe Silicon Valley people don't like it, but technology now allows you to create that piece of content, put it out there, and say, this is $100 worth of value if anyone wants to watch it. And you can enforce, and you can give this incentive for anyone who markets it. The moment the moment your content gets to the consumer, and the consumer pays, at that very moment, 10% would go to the person who's marketed it, and another 10% would go to any infrastructure or entity that is hosting it, and the rest would go to you. And that is enforced by the technology, right? It's very important to emphasize on it, like it's enforced systematically and by the technology. This would allow an entire different marketplace for ideas, for thoughts, and rapid innovation in a way we exchange ideas in our society and we grow together. By simply creating an open market for thoughts and ideas. And again, that's why my opening was very important, even though it may have looked a bit, I don't know, non-techy or something. We started tampering with information, but we haven't actually tampered with the information in a level that is building the fabric of our society and us as individual. And it's starting to happen. The way it is happening right now is just being self-driven. There's no direction, but we can take control of it. One of those things that we can do is by simply, okay, here it was. That's what I wanted to actually mention. By making this happen in a way that we believe it's better to happen. And this would facilitate, again, all those stories, thoughts, contents that creates the fabric of our society. I don't have this example here. Maybe I just remembered to tell you at one point, but I'll just say it now. For example, it's a bit cliche, but when we hear conversations about whether Facebook has had an impact on American election, right? So regardless of what the argument is, the fact that we have this news title, if you think about it, if you take yourself 20 years ago, not long ago, and we're talking about a company having influence on a company that's regulated, it's not like dark web or anything, having influence on the election of the most important states in the world. So this means something. This means that the information, when I say stories, this means that right now there is no control over the way our thoughts, our interactions in the society in terms of digital information is being exchanged, and either deliberately or undeliberately it's being exploited. So that was the first story. Okay, the point I wanted to make, we had provenance, and then we have open market. I'm going to the next example. So this story is called Department of Food. In this town, there's a department called Department of Food, and the way people eat in this city is even more interesting. So there's no food anywhere else, and the only food is there by definition because they are those who control food. When you go there, there's 1,000 different menu items, all different possibilities of different allergies. So if you have these 2 allergies, there's a menu item for you, and the department is doing its best out of goodwill, a good heart, to make sure that it caters for all different variety and combinations of allergies and also preferences, and they're working hard. They're doing a lot of UX and UX research and information architecture and complex ways of doing things and iterations and agile and everything, which is great. That department exists. It's called Big Road, and it's trying to tell you whether, I'm not saying it's doing a bad job, I'm talking about future, just for the difference. It's trying to tell you whether you need a driver's license or not. If you're coming from overseas, if you're coming from Tasmania, if you're just here on a tourist visa, on a permanent visa, on a student visa. It's trying to make sure that everyone who comes to the website gets what they want through different pages and different design and everything. Whereas there's a much simpler solution if you simply add it to this. This is an initiative right now, an actual project by Data 61. How many people do know what Data 61 is, actually? If you do, please raise your hand. That's 4. Okay, thank you. So 10 people, that's really good. So it's rebranded. I don't recall the previous brand name. Center of Excellence for something. 2015, and they're doing a great job. So this is one of their initiatives. It's a mix of government and corporate industry bodies collaborating with each other to do innovation. This is one of their projects called Regulation as a Platform. Did anyone know about this? 2, 3, awesome. That's very good. So very briefly, Regulation as a Platform, and also please correct me if I'm wrong or inaccurate, is an intent to provide a language that make regulation, dumb it down, make it machine readable, simplify it, and also provide all the tools and services that would allow stakeholders to leverage on it. Is that right? So now, getting back to the Department of Food, what they can simply do is they can provide the ingredients, and then when you go there, you just compose your own menu or recipe. You know you're lactose intolerant, you don't go to that section, you don't pick anything that you're intolerant. You do it yourself. And it simply becomes possible with things combining each other. One is basically with us, instead of trying to give the user the flattened data, if we give them the ingredient. And the second is by users using technology at their end, which I'm talking about personalization and stuff like that, to get what they want. And an example of the application of this simply could be for Vic Road. If I'm driving from Melbourne to Sydney, the moment I went through from Wodonga to Albury, let's say, on the highway, I get a notification which says, because you're on a student visa, let's say, you can't drive now because this is New South Wales. There's a slight difference. So things that you don't even know, it can notify you. So you wouldn't even need to go to the website at the first place to check your driving license, but also all sort of other things become possible. And I should remember to get back to this when I talk about personal applications. So far, so good? So this is the one that I couldn't come with a good example, but I say it to make the point. So the other way that again, getting back to my first points, personal stories are actual technology is actually intervening us and interacting with the stories that are making our identity is, I'm going to communicate through this story, but I'm going to say this story because it's just, it's not that exciting. I'll give you a real example. So we started using technology to leverage our abilities. For example, if you want to wake up in the morning, you set the alarm, right? But you do it. You use one machine to do that. If you want to eat a certain thing, you just buy it. You make it ready. If you want to drink water, you do all these things. All the processing is happening at your end. And if you have an agenda, if you want to become healthier, lose weight, whatever that is, if it's school holiday, you want to change or maybe, I don't know, for whatever reason your lifestyle is changing, you have to do all the calculations yourself. But now, slowly, if you think about it from today, if you notice, the way we interact with technology is getting more inside, and we are being less explicit. And for example, we say, so Google, let's say, knows about the path that you drive and things that you shop. No, Amazon Alexa is a better example of that because you shop as well. You can simply say, I want to wake up earlier tomorrow. Or you can say, I don't know if there's an app like that or not, because Amazon has this marketplace for skills. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a skill like that for Alexa right now already. You can say, I want to lose weight. It already knows what kind of food you're buying, what time you're waking up, because it knows your alarm and everything. You've given access to that. You can simply say what you want to happen. It's a story that you're communicating to the technology. And the technology bit is putting different things together, interacting with other interfaces, other entities, again through things that I would also call them stories, to make that happen for you. The next step of that, again, prediction, simply would tell us, you can say, I want to understand, let's say, I'm doing a full-time work, I want to learn via like guitar. You just say that. And you don't need to think about what you need to do. 2 days later, a week later, you get a notification, there's a course right near that opens like 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. right where you work, and they have a promotion, something like that. Let's say you've also put your budget in your personalized agent. So as you see, you can actually be more and more general about who you want to become, and the machines do it for you. And those of us who resist this path, we will convert or disappear. Like those of us, including myself, was refusing to use Google Maps because I thought I know better. You do it a few times, and then when you're late, it says that way, you go that way, right? You can't resist it, and if you don't join Facebook, then you get isolated, right? If I want to post my event, I have to post it on Facebook. If I put a random like face or something, people don't like it. I have to put my face up. There's no way to get around it. So these things are coming, and none of these things are extraordinary, and all of these things can actually get back to projects that we're doing. This is my main point that I want to say. Before I get to that part, I want to now that I've said all this base, I want to say how the whole thing can go wrong, right? And this is the bit that I haven't prepared specifically how to describe it, but I'll try. The different trends that are coming together is one of them, of course, as you might have imagined, that I might mention at one point, artificial intelligence. It's very, very important to understand what's happening with artificial intelligence. The first thing, why it became a thing the past few years, all of a sudden, out of the blue, even though it existed fundamentally for decades, and what's happening, what's changing now as we're speaking. So what made it possible was a few trends coming together. Processing power and the amount of data that was accessible to that processing power because of the sensors and everything, and the fact that we were carrying phones. So there were actual viable applications of it, and you could actually do it. So that's why it happened, but it still was in the cloud. And almost all the AI that's happening right now is on the cloud. It means on actual infrastructure, even though your phone is capable of doing some. But what's happening right now, we're getting to the point that we can actually run what it takes to run machine learning or deep learning on a mobile device. When that happens, that would be the next breakthrough, and we would start seeing way more crazy things, because you won't need a network, and also you can do things that people wouldn't buy, the market wouldn't buy, because of the concern of privacy, because of the lack of connection, connectivity, and all sort of things. So that's the second, we are at the verge of the second phase. So that's one trend. And again, it's technology, maybe there's no connotation to it necessarily. That's one thing. The other one is the way, again about AI, but the way AI is driven, the business model of it, at the moment is basically all about concentrated, centralized entities, concentrated data, because there is no reason you don't do it the other way. And this is a self-reinforcing thing that's making other options totally not viable, and that's an absolute danger for us, because there is an alternative. With the technology, we can achieve the same things that machine learning and artificial intelligence is giving to us in a distributed manner without needing an entity to have access to all the information just for telling us where the traffic is. Google or Waze or another centralized entity doesn't need to know where everyone is doing just to tell us where the traffic is. These are like basic examples, but I don't want to go deeper in that. The third one is, there are many trends, but the most important one is health and biology, because it's something that it has direct benefit for us. We would all embrace it, and also it will be enforced on us by the state, which is good. But the implication of it is that we will become visible as individuals in a very scary way, because now what makes you you, what makes you want what you want, what makes you all the emotions, all the things that actually makes you and makes you interact with the rest of the system and makes the whole thing stable, becomes visible to any entity that's interacting with you in a technological layer. And if we haven't established proper infrastructure in terms of being, I'm not necessarily talking about privacy, talking about being distributed, then we will have some problems. And we know when the market is pushing something forward, nothing stops it, because there is absolutely no, and we can't regulate these things. We shouldn't. We should establish counteract technologies. I want to end on this. How am I going with time?
Just 10 seconds.
Oh, good. All right. So this might be a bit complex to explain, but I just say the end of it, and I'm happy to explain what I mean by that. Not only we as individuals very soon can actually express ourselves on who we want to become, and our personal AI agent can actually facilitate that for that to happen. Any community can also do the same thing if all the processes and the content, the way they interact with each other, is known by a distributed technology, I call it collective intelligence, we collectively can set an agenda for our city, for our community, and all the little things that needs to happen for that, needs to be in place for that to happen, would be set. So if we want to, let's say, fight family violence in Victoria, we wouldn't just say 400. It was a crazy number. $400,000 is not crazy. I hope it wasn't $400 million, but a crazy number was for last year, I forgot. We can just simply say, as our department in Victoria, say, this is what we want to happen. And this collective intelligence knows about all our agenda, what we want to try to achieve, and finds a common pathway with the same amount of kind of compromise from all the entities, and comes up with an actual practical pathway for that to happen in a distributed way. That's what it is, that's what I'm trying to make. We can actually dream it, and it can actually happen. We can just take steps towards it. Using technology, vital technology, all of us can contribute to it. So does that mean we don't have time for questions? We do have time for questions? Cool. All right, cool. So that's what I decided to talk about now, even though I have stuff. That's it.